Man, there's not enough time in the frickin' day. There's not enough time in a month or a year. I had the whole day to go do a bunch of this stuff. And I got caught up doing some other stuff. Now what? It's 2 o'clock. I only got a couple hours of light left to get done what I wanted to do, and it's not enough. Whine cry, right? Where am I right now? Right now I am at the mouth, basically the mouth of the Sioux Valley. And I'm about, 300 yards away from where that unfortunate guy got jumped by the cat a few days ago. My cat's dead, by the way. I'm not sure I should go about approaching that guy. I mean, you don't want to be one of those loser paparazzi types that goes and hounds his personal home and pounds on the door, see if he wants to share his story. Well, meanwhile, his wounds are still oozing. I'm sure I know somebody who knows him and has his phone number. Maybe I'll try him a call. I wouldn't mind hearing what happened. Be interesting. Be interesting to hear how it went down, how he got out of it, and how he got away from that cat's clutches. Because like I said earlier, you are less likely to survive a cat attack as you are a grizzly attack, because they are attacking you as you're a food source and nothing else. Especially this time of year too, right? But anyway, I got so many emails. Oops. Actually, there's a fella, I've been trying to find this email volley that I had with a fella that lives, I forget, if you're watching, you either live in Fort St. John and you have that private hunting property on the Peace River across from that other town you told me about in your email, and throw me a quick email again, would you? Or comment in the comment section or something, because I can't find your frickin' email. And I want to share it after you sent me the other email saying go ahead and share it and share your name. Because I think I don't want to share exactly where your hunting property is for obvious hunting reasons, right? But I wouldn't mind sharing that because I have a bunch of friends that live right around there, and they've been contacting me quite often, asking me about more and more details of what's going on around there. And every single one of them has told me they are filling in their children about what's going on in the woods where they live, because they all hunt, they all live rurally. And that's exactly what the point of all this is, right? It's keeping everybody honestly informed, because we haven't been. So, yeah, you know who you are. You emailed me a while back. That thing tore your natural spring water line out and stacked up all those logs and shit in your way and stuff. And I had another fella email me about one he saw. I don't know, I've probably had a half a dozen people email me from within, that triangle, the triangle of Hudson Hope, Chetwynd, Tumbler Ridge, Fort St. John. And that whole zone is absolutely riddled with numerous sightings from guys just like you and me, very, very seasoned outdoors people, hunters, and they are emailing nonstop. All right, so anyway, I'm babbling, but if you are listening to me right now, send me a message, all right, so that I can get your name again and dig up those emails, because I've got so many frickin' emails, it's insane trying to find one that I want to go back and reply to again, because I have. Wasn't my fault originally either. It was originally with my other new business getting set up. The girls I had helping me, they were all paranoid about security and access, and they ended up making about 5 or 6 different email addresses to address different portions of the internet business that I created about 6 years ago. And it's just a big cluster, and I haven't got all of them into one yet, so I keep having, I'll get up in the morning and I'll check 6, 7 email addresses under one domain, and then I've got Gmail addresses. It's frustrating, all right? So, yeah, if you could send me a quick note with your name so I can search your name in my inbox and get that email, because I really want to share that with some of my friends who live near you who want to know what's going on as well. I want to keep them right up to date of what's happened around their homes, around where they hunt, and where they guide, so they know. All right, what do we got? I got to put it in airplane mode so I don't get all these stupid notifications while I'm reading. And another thing, too, for all you people who have injected that I might be getting followed by helicopters, quit doing that. You have come up with that on your own. So here's the deal with my token helicopter mentions. I live in the sea to sky region of British Columbia, We have so many heli skiing outfits here, it's insane. We have snowmobilers, sleds getting rescued by helicopters. We have people getting dropped off and picked up by helicopters nonstop. There's an airport basically within 1,500 yards of where I live, where some pricks hover and practice hovering and flying a helicopter nonstop from I think 2:30 till 5 every single day. And everywhere I've been going lately is not by sled access or quad access, so I'm using my pickup right now, and I'm very limited because of the snow load. All the access roads have got 3, 4, 5 feet of snow on them, and I haven't busted out my snowmobile yet. And I have to go buy a new snow sled ramp for my pickup truck, which is an hour and a half drive to go buy it. So I'm stuck. What I'm saying is I'm stuck to filming in these corridors, and the same corridors of filming in, these helicopters using them non-stop. There goes a plane right above me now. If you haven't noticed yet, I can't stand background sound. I was bugging David Blattis a while back about he'll just throw down next to a truck with reverse beeper going on or wind in the camera or whatever, and he just smashes right through and carries on filming. Where me, if I hear a squirrel chatter in the background, it makes me go, shut up. It's just me. So that's why I bitch about helicopters, all right? No, I don't think there's helicopters following me. Not yet, anyway. So, what do we got to share? Again, there's so many emails. There's so many. Every single day. Every single day. I'd like to start by apologizing for the long email. I'll try to make it as short as possible without leaving out any information that I feel relevant. It all started when I turned 12 years old. I live in an estate that had a beautiful national park with one of the best trout rivers in the United States. One of my birthday presents was finally getting permission to cross a fairly busy highway on the southernmost edge of said park by myself so that I could go fish any time that I wanted. Several days after my birthday, after I had, of course, been fishing every spare minute of my time every single day, I was trying a mayfly on my rod and couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Okay, we need commas and periods, all right, you guys? I thought maybe my father had followed me to keep an eye on me, and feeling comfortable with that in mind, I brushed it off and started fishing. I'd caught 3 nice trout and had them in my basket, which is tied to the tire of my mountain bike, which I rode to the river every time I went. I made a long cast to the opposite bank and landed in a small bush. I felt the need to retrieve my tackle because it's my favorite fly, as I've been tying my own since I was 10 years old, and caught countless fish on the fly in question. I made my way down the river about 20 yards and across a shallow spot that was about waist deep and retrieved my fly. On my way back across, I noticed my bike had fallen over. When I got back to it, amazingly, my basket was dragged up the edge of the woods and all 3 of my fish were gone. That creeped me out. I hastily made my way home to tell my father what had happened, thinking I may have been in danger, being near a wild animal of some kind. He offered no light on the subject and said that they probably got out of the basket somehow, but I knew better. A few days later, I returned to the spot, and when I bent down to tie my basket to my bike, I noticed what appeared to be wet footprints going down river, but I couldn't at that time be sure. But again, I started feeling uneasy, as if someone was watching me, and as I scanned the other side of the river, I took note of a huge bush that I hadn't ever noticed before, then continued scanning downriver. Then the strangest thing happened. I looked back to the bush and it was gone. This, of course, freaked me out, and I left before I ever casted my pole. The next day I had a different game plan, and I thought I would wear my chest waders and go down the river to some deeper holes where I had caught some big fish, but it was such a hike I didn't really care to go, especially alone. But after all the strange happenings, I thought I would make the trip to get away from whatever it was that was making me so uncomfortable at my normal hole. So I'm halfway to my spot when I start to cross a fallen tree that I always cross to get to the opposite side of the river, so I could fish the deep, calm side, and I noticed that tree was soaked. Thought it was weird, but continued to cross, and that's when it happened. I slipped and fell off the side of the tree. I was able to sit my pole and tackle box on the log, and then the current, which had been filling my waders, sucked me away from the tree. Danger. And as I was trying to kick them off, I got sucked under and started to panic. I was under for several seconds before I remembered the filling knife I kept in my belt, and I grabbed it out and made a long slice down each leg of my boots, which let me come up long enough to take a deep breath before being pulled under once again. I fought and struggled to get my waders off, but as I started to black out, I realized it was no use, and at that moment, I made peace with the fact that I was going to drown right here, right now, and there's nothing I could do about it. All of a sudden, I got a feeling of total peace and calm. I talked about a feeling that up to this point in my young life, I had no idea even existed, and I felt like I was not alone. That's when a log hit me in the chest, and before I could make sense of what was happening, I was out of the water, laying on the bank, choking and crying, and through tear-filled eyes, I saw something to this day I can't explain, but I know what it was. It was a huge, hairy man. I couldn't really make out his facial features because my eyes were watering so bad, and without a sound, it disappeared into the trees as fast as it had appeared. But I know for sure that this Bigfoot saved my life. I raced home, still crying, and when my parents seen my torn-up boots and my demeanor, they knew something terrible had happened. But when I told them the events that took place, my mother had told me to go lay down because I had obviously hit my head, and she was calling a doctor to come and check me out. As I climbed into bed, my father entered my room and told me there was no doctor coming, and he called my mother in. It was at this time he told me and my mother for the first time of the big, hairy man he had been seeing from time to time on our property. In fact, every night after dinner, he would take our table scraps and leftovers out to an old tree stump in the back corner of our property and feed it to the wild animals. And this is the first place he had seen it. I've thought about it a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that this thing was watching me for however long, and just maybe since my dad is feeding it, it looked out for me, for him. What do you think? Well, I think that is one hell of an experience. And I also, not that I think, but I know that you're not alone with that same experience. I think we've all read or heard over this past few years or more of numerous people being helped out by these beings. Pretty amazing, isn't it? And, there's been native fishermen have had their boats on shore at river mouths to go net fish, filled them up, tide went out, couldn't move their boat. And one native guy noted that as he left to go get help and came back, the boat was pushed into the water and there's a few fish missing with the great big huge Sasquatch prints going down to the shore, pushed the boat in for him, took some fish and left, right? There's that guy, I think 2 people now have been saved from predator attacks on them. I think big cats were attacking them and they got saved by these things. What else? There's been numerous children who've been picked up and deposited back in the yards, carried to safety. It's endless, right? But and it's fortunate. It's very fortunate. But don't forget, there's more than just these things running around out in the woods, unexplainable things, okay? So there are some beings ripping around that cause harm. And there is a good handful of people looking into those, a lot more than I am. I'm not really looking into them myself. I don't really have time, but I definitely get a lot of emails from people when it comes to various topics of extremely large canines, abnormally large, caught in the headlights, seen in the woods, all sorts of weird things. But the thing about the weird things, the weird reports that come in, is they're spread out all over the country, all over the continent, all over the world, and they're coming in from people that do not have a clue about each other, but they're telling the same story. So there you go. It's a crazy world out there, man. Thank God you lived. I've guided on rivers before, drift boats for steelhead fishing. I'm all very, very too familiar with how much death rivers represent with humans. Water doesn't stop. It does not stop. The most tame, fun swimming hole rivers take lives every single year from that moving water. And especially when you go into logs, and especially with the waders on that fill up and suck you in. Yikes, that'll be a shitty way to go. Now, what else do we got? Hi, Steve. I'm new to your channel, and honestly, I don't even know how you ended up on my YouTube feed. I'm guessing my niece or nephew may have been searching for Bigfoot videos at some point during a sleepover, and their search must have locked my television into the YouTube algorithms somehow, and anyway, here I am. Needless to say, I watched that first video mostly because it was there in front of me and I was bored, not gonna lie. But I liked it. I became very intrigued with your format, so I began watching more of your videos. And obviously, there's another reason why I was compelled to watch the first one, and that's because I have a story to tell that I've never shared with anyone else. I'm a professional pilot. and can't afford any negative publicity directed towards me, as I'm sure you can understand. My name is Jeff, and we'll just leave it at that. Okay, Jeff, let her rip. About 9 years ago, I was on a short work trip with a 2-day layover in Medford, Oregon. My co-pilot was a stick-in-the-mud type of guy that didn't want to do anything but hang out at the hotel. That wasn't going to work for me, so I jumped in the rental car and decided to just drive around and do some local exploring. My intention was to find some place for a short day hike since it was late September and obviously beautiful that day. Not sure if you're familiar with the city of Medford, but it is essentially located in the distant shadow of Mount Shasta. As I said, the weather was beautiful, and the thick redwood forest around Mount Shasta were calling my name. It's a relatively short drive from Medford, so I thought, why not? Highway 5 is the main artery that connects Oregon with California, but as soon as I got near Shasta, I started taking random exits in search of something more interesting than what could be seen from the highway. A few unsuccessful attempts led me back to the highway, but I eventually found an exit that looked like it held some promise. I followed it for 20 miles after exiting Highway 5, and in relatively short order, it turned into a narrow, winding road. My kind of road. However, though I was enjoying the scenic drive on a twisty mountain road deep in the forest, it's only so much fun in a Toyota Camry rental car, so I decided to turn around since I hadn't found any potential hiking areas. And of course, that's precisely when I stumbled across a trailhead next to the road with a small parking area. The trail may have had a name, but I never saw a marker. There was one other vehicle there, an older Ford pickup truck in really excellent condition. It definitely caught my eye as I parked my car and got out, happy I'd finally found a place to take a short hike and stretch my legs. There's a very small area just in front of where the trail started, with a rickety old picnic table beneath some trees. And sitting there was the owner of the truck, a very nice elderly man with long gray hair tied back in a ponytail. He was wearing a baseball cap, blue jeans, and a long-sleeved denim shirt, buttoned all the way to the top with a bunch of papers that would look like maps spread out in front of him. As soon as I came near, he tipped his cap and said hello. He asked if I was going on a hike. I told him that was the plan. He mentioned I had picked a very pretty trail and confessed to him that it actually picked me. Anyway, we continued chatting for a few minutes, just making small talk, so I decided to ask him about his truck. I told him my grandfather had one just like it. He said he bought it new in '68, and that it's the one and only vehicle he's ever owned. Wow. That actually blew my mind. I asked if he had restored it because it looked like it was in mint condition, but he said no. He just always takes care of it. Needless to say, I was impressed. Me too. I love '68. I got a '68 Camaro hidden away. I love older vehicles, man. He just always took care of it. Needless to say, I was impressed. Just as our conversation was dying down, I decided to ask him what brought him out to this spot today. He said this is his favorite spot for him to enjoy the solitude and work on his project. When I inquired about what type of project, he said he was an amateur investigator. I never really knew there was such a thing, but that aroused my curiosity, so I asked what he was investigating. He said quite casually, "Oh, just a bunch of unsolved murders and a missing persons cases." Wow, now he had my attention. At this point, if I don't make an attempt to shorten the story, we'll go on for 3,000 words or more. I don't want to do that to you, so I'll just cut right to the chase. At his invitation, I sat down at the picnic table and he spread out some maps and papers with lots of handwritten notes. On the maps, he had bunches of colored dots, some black, some red, some green, and some blue dots. Anyway, it was immediately apparent by looking at the maps that the dots appeared in clusters, and it was also apparent that these clusters were in forested mountainous terrain. I asked him first about the significance of the different colored dots. He explained that each dot represented a missing person or unsolved murder. Yellow dots depicted a spot if a missing person was last seen, but who was never located. Red dots were for people whose bodies were found, and green dots represented articles of clothing, personal possessions, or body parts, bones, teeth, belonging to the people shown by yellow dots. The blue dots represented these same body parts and things, but for unidentified people. Wow. At this point, I was very intrigued. He had explained the meaning of all the dots except the black dots within the clusters. My curious nature got the best of me and asked him what the black dots represented. He said those are Sasquatch sightings over the same time period as the missing persons and murder cases shown by the yellow and red dots. By now, I'm sure you see where the story is headed, and I quickly put two and two together as well. Wait, so you're out here investigating Sasquatch as a murder suspect? I involuntarily laughed a bit when I said that, but he wasn't laughing at all. I immediately apologized, felt like an ass because I wasn't raised like that, to just laugh in someone's face, especially an elderly person. Thankfully, he took no offense and proceeded over the course of about an hour to painstakingly show me his notes on approximately 10 of what looked like at least 50 yellow and red dots. He had extensive information on each person. Their name, age, marital status, physical condition, where they were from, what they did for a living, you name it. He seemed like he knew everything about these victims. Then he went over the eyewitness accounts of each of the corresponding Sasquatch sightings that occurred on the same or next day as these people went missing. The more in depth he went with connecting each victim to a sighting, the more incredible it seemed. At some point, I asked him how long he'd been looking into the subject, and he said for the last 10 years since he had retired. He said he was a full-blooded Native American of the Miwok tribe, M-I-W-O-K, which I confessed to him I was not familiar with, and had never heard of it, and that it was commonly accepted among his ancestors and tribal elders that Sasquatch existed. It was just a simple fact, and as sure as horses and cows existed. The Miwok believe Sasquatch to be the individuals with distinct personalities just like humans and other creatures of the earth. He asked me if I had pets and said yes all my life. Then he asked if I ever ran across a mean dog, to which I also responded yes. He went on to say his tribe's ancient beliefs held that while most Sasquatch were benign creatures who simply wanted to be left alone, there were some who were malevolent and violent. He was told from the time he was a small boy that his own father had been stolen by a Sasquatch, never to be seen again. However, as he grew into a teenager, he rebelled and chose to believe that his father had simply abandoned him and his mother. But as he grew older and finally retired, he began to take notice of the large numbers of missing persons being reported throughout the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, as well as the coastal redwood forests of northwestern California and southern Oregon. He said thoughts of his father came rushing back to him, and soon one thing led to another, and he found himself coming up with a theory that perhaps some, not all, but maybe some of these missing person cases could be Sasquatch related. And thus his journey to becoming an amateur investigator began. And here he was now, 10 years into his journey, and I just happened to come across him on a remote stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. How crazy is that? I shook my head so many times during our conversation my neck was hurting. I was incredulous, skeptical, intrigued, and fascinated, all rolled up into one. I thanked him for one of those most mesmerizing conversations I'd ever had in my life and bid him goodbye as I set out on my hike. He told me to enjoy the trail. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "And be careful." With that, he started gathering up his things, and I began walking up the trail. However, there was something about the way he said, "Be careful," that spooked the shit out of me. I can testify under an oath that I walked that trail for less than 60 seconds before deciding I was no longer in the mood for a hike, and immediately turned around to head a few steps back to the trailhead and parking area. I rounded the corner and was going to jokingly tell him, "Thanks for spooking the hell out of me, buddy." But when I turned the corner, he and his truck were gone. The really weird thing is, I walked for no more than 50 feet up that trail and 50 feet back down. I was gone for maybe 60 seconds tops. Could he gather up all his belongings and walk back to his truck in that amount of time? Sure, I guess so. But could he have climbed in, shut the door, started it up, backed out, and headed down the road in that amount of time? All without me ever hearing a door shut or an engine start or the sound of crunching dirt and pebbles under the tires or the sound of the engine accelerating down the road? Apparently so, since there was no sign of him or his truck. But just like a crazy conversation and his incredible Sasquatch murder theory, that old man's silent, hasty exit has always stuck in my mind too. Anyway, I hope this story wasn't a letdown. I know it might be a little different from the type of stories people usually share, but I thought you might find this one somewhat interesting nonetheless. Thanks for taking the time to read it, Steve. It feels good to have finally shared it. Jeff. Well, thank you, Jeff. And, thank you, Jeff, for sharing that. I found it freaking interesting as hell. I found it very interesting. And, I don't know if maybe you haven't heard me mention it before. There isn't anybody's stories who don't count. There's anybody out there that doesn't count. You come here and you want to share something, you get shared, all right? And if you're one of the unfortunate few who wake up in the morning and decide you're going to go online and check out a topic that actually you have no interest in and it makes you mad, What are you doing here? This is the wrong place for your ass. Seems to be, it's funny how the waves of those people seem to come and go, right? I'll get notified, somebody will email me or message me or whatever. Friend will say somebody's being a dick and point out who it is, and then I gotta go find who it is and frickin' block their ass. It's not that common, though. There's not that many people that do that. But that's very, very interesting story for me to read. And while we're on that topic, we have an area in British Columbia called the Highway of Tears. It's the highway that links Prince George with the west coast of British Columbia. All right? And there is dozens of women have gone missing on that highway. Predominantly Native women. And somewhere way back when, I can't remember if I read it or somebody told me, some Native communities up there had made mention to the RCMP that it was possibly something a little odd that was responsible for these women disappearing. And I recently had an email from someone who asked me not to share the email, and I got to honor that. And they made some mentions of some abnormal things they seen not too far from there as well. And if that's the case, what I'm getting at is, if any of you are First Nations communities around there, and if you have any information you want to share to let the people know, whereas the mainstream news won't share what you have to say, if it is possibly related to people going missing, email me and share it here, and I will get it out. And I really want to hear from you, okay? So I think that would be very, very handy for people to hear the honest truth if there's some truth being withheld from the mainstream news outlets, which I have no time for and I don't watch. So anyways, thanks for that email, Jeff. And for all you out there still watching and listening and kicking the dirt when it comes to possibly sharing what's in your mind, driving you a little bonkers, just get it out. Just let it out and share it. All right? It does help. We're helping thousands of people. I'm getting emails from people who are being massively assisted and helped by this nonstop. So there you go. There's a couple more.